right, greetings and salutations. I mentioned on yesterday's stream, in case you missed it, that I'm gonna go easy this week because I don't want to start anything that I don't think I'm gonna finish, and I'm not sure. So far, I've been lucky in being able to stream every day, but the specter of having to drop a stream or two, I guess I was gonna say or three, but technically I can no longer miss three. I can miss two at the most. Hey, Brian Smith has led me to want to kind of just do stuff that I can kind of do in a contained sort of leisurely manner and not get anything. That's right. Brian Smith says dropping 1D3 streams. Yep, 1D3, 1D4 minus one maybe. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I do have some articles, as one of which is poking up right here that we can read, or we can chat about anything that comes to mind. I did sit in on I could probably look at this too. Some folks can let me know. I did take part just in an audience way. So I guess I go back to the beginning. I got an email from Free League, not anything special to me. Something I think they, to all the kind of content creators, I guess, that are on their list about they're partnering with Alchemy, the VTT, to run Vaesen games next month. So they set up these sort of training's too much word. Intro kind of, I don't want to say courses, sort of intro streams, I guess live, whatever. You could basically go and learn about it, kind of an intro to learn about Vaesen and learn about Alchemy, the VTT. And I did that. And they had a few scheduled. And they had one that was this morning at 9 a.m. So I just jumped on that one because I figured, well, I could sneak that one in. And I guess as a sort of a thank you for attending, they gave us some codes for to unlock basically the Vaesen core books on Alchemy, core book, I should say, on Alchemy. I could probably go check that out. Check that on one side because I watched their whole thing and it was live. It wasn't like it was pre-recorded or anything, but I watched and listened to the whole presentation. It was half on Alchemy and kind of maneuvering through their UI and the kind of stuff it does, and then half on Vaesen, which I've wanted to learn more about it, and I have digital copies of the books, but it just hasn't gotten off the slush pile yet. So that was kind of fun. So I do have that in Alchemy, which maybe I can do tomorrow, maybe if I can stream. I don't know. Folks, let me know if looking at that would be interesting. I don't know if there's an hour's worth of things to do unless I just start monkeying around in there. I mean, I'd have to do monkeying anyway because I'm not familiar with Alchemy other than watching it. I remember I didn't talk to them. I saw them. They were at PAX, this past PAX Unplugged, but I didn't get around to talking to them. I did talk to them, I think, the year before. I don't know if it was at PAX East or PAX Unplugged. So I'm a little bit familiar with just kind of the demo thing they were running about it. But it's a pretty slick interface. It's one where you have to buy it's another, you have to buy the books. So I think the Vaesen core book is something like $30. It is enhanced on there, which means they've added stuff like they've kind of obviously brought it all into the system. I think they've added just different things for them, but there's music and anyway, just kind of doodads that if you're playing it on the system on that platform, and obviously why would you be buying it if you weren't, then that would be helpful. And this is just kind of a sip of watered down apple cider for the working man. I do have some articles in my backlog, and I thought, well, while I'm seeing what folks want to talk about, if anything, you guys just tend to let me ramble, which I always think is dangerous. I do have some articles in the backlog, a few about FKR, and since I've been just finished Muster, which is kind of an FKR sort of, I don't know, it's related to FKR. I think people kind of look at that. It's not FKR. I don't think it itself really, but it is in terms of the war gaming part of it and looking at the game that way. I think it harkens back to the same things, or at least some of the same things that FKR as a movement is harkening back to. So I'll start here. We're at rolltodoubt.wordpress.com. There's a few of these. I'm trying to see if I'm reading them in the right order. So this one, I have 3 articles here. This one's from 12/7, 12/14, and then 12. Okay, so it looks like they've got. There might even be a 4th one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the order I should read this in. Oh, maybe I should just start here. Okay, so let's start here because I think this will actually work better. So we're on the rolltodoubt.wordpress.com. I'm just on the December page. This first article is called An Easy Suggestion to Start in FKR. This is not prescriptive. I don't know your setting, the rule sets you may have used in the past, or your players, but I do know that FKR can intimidate people mainly by two factors: the difficulty in understanding what it is, and there's an attempt at explaining it, which I think we'll get to in a minute, and the fear that it's extremely demanding on the referee. That you aren't cut to run FKR style unless you know your setting or genre as well as a Prussian officer knows war. I want to dispel that BS. All right, Smith said they just started rolling up a random character and using random tables and oracles to explore the world building stuff they've partially made. Fun so far. Awesome. Are you going to, Brian Smith, are you going to do that Hexplore 24, the kind of the solo version of it? FKR's difficulty doesn't need to be another misconception in the hobby, like that playing in Glorantha demands complete knowledge of the setting and a degree in comparative mythology. A short note on playing Glorantha: ignore every idiot who thinks the above and wants to gatekeep the setting. Your Glorantha will vary. A suggestion on how you can start: sit down and watch a bunch of Harryhausen films for inspiration. Grab a short summary of Glorantha for names and basic information. Do an extremely simple adventure like a small dungeon, or breaking into an enemy camp, or a small investigation, or whatever. Or grab an acclaimed module like Borderlands or Griffin Mountain. Run that and add information as your campaign progresses. It's that simple. All right, that was on Glorantha. I have no familiarity with Glorantha. I'm kind of interested in it. People seem to think really highly of the setting. I'm just pretty much completely ignorant on it at the moment. So here's my suggestion on how you can start FKR once you know the principles. Think what setting or at least adventure you want to run. Take simple notes on that or just grab a module. You can write down setting principles that the players must know, but don't worry about anything beyond what seems relevant to the immediate game. What rule sets do you know well? Look at the adventure you want to run and think if anything on those rule sets could help. Select what procedures you think would work. Ignore how they fit together because they don't need to. If you're running black box, few to none player-facing rules, nobody will have to learn anything. Think of them based on what they help abstracting that is directly present in the fiction. When selecting procedures, consider if they seem like they would force your decisions as referee in a certain direction. Story games may sometimes do that. If they would, but you still think they would be useful, remember you can ignore them as soon as they conflict with the world or your decisions. It doesn't matter if you use them so far. When in doubt, you can do a coin toss. The principles of the world will be your conscience. All right, so this is kind of that. I'm just opening my window here. I'm a little bit that weird part where it's cold outside, but I'm sitting right next to a heater, so it's cold out, but the heater is boiling me slightly. Brian Smith hadn't heard about that. It's called Hexplore 24, Brian Smith, and if you go to the forums, there was actually a post about it a little while back with some discussion, so you can check it out. Oh, let's see. Okay. Character creation is important in FKR for the players to grasp the setting. If you don't know what character creation procedure to use, here's a suggestion. Use the old house rules method of asking each player to write down 30 words about their character. There's also the Hero Quest method of 100 words. That will help both sides to understand what the character may do and where they fit. You can, of course, use any creation method you wish and fit them to the selected procedures. Start playing, note down rulings you made, see what procedures work and which give you trouble. Note down small things about the setting that the table seemed interested in to develop further later. Sit down and consider all of that. It's that easy. Think of yourself not as the free Kriegspiel umpire, already perfect in their knowledge of the game and the simulation, but as someone slowly training to be an umpire, carving their own way. It's just a game. Don't fret it. And if you use all these suggestions to run FKR and Glorantha, let me know. And then there was a quick edit. Have some actual play reports. Maybe I'll get to these down the line. Mech Jack says character creations for boomers. Could be. I mean, I don't know if I'm curious what people. So I've been exploring FKR in various sources and books and things that have influence or seem to be I don't know important in the FKR scene. Let's say, but I still have no experience playing FKR, but I tend to think, and maybe I'm just coming from a place where I could run a lot of things in something I'm familiar with, say a setting I'm familiar with. I could run a lot of things without having to lean on a lot of procedures. Maybe because I've been playing something BX that doesn't have a ton of procedures anyway, And so then it becomes, well, instead of rolling under stat or whatever thing I was, or saving throw or something like that, I'm using something else. Maybe I'm just coming up with numbers. But I don't know. I feel like it. Maybe I'll just have to try it because it doesn't seem like if you're already playing. I guess it comes. I guess what I'm saying maybe is if you're coming from an OSR kind of place, it seems like if you wanted to try out FKR, I feel like you're already in a pretty good spot because you've been playing lots of systems that are probably pretty rules light, that are relying on lots of rulings and sort of ad hoc type of procedures, or using things like an X and 6 kind of guidelines. And so then dropping the other stuff and just saying, hey, we're just going to use X and 6, easy, medium, difficult, whatever we determine. And then if you have some kind of modifier, I'm strong, then you just figure out some kind of flat, kind of like, okay, well, now you have advantage. Or I'm weak, okay, have disadvantage kind of thing. If you even wanted to do that, it feels like would be pretty doable. But I'm sure I'm missing all kinds of intricacies or just ways that we get kind of caught up in our own ways of doing things. I'm not sure. I guess I'll just have to try. I need to try it. Anywho, I'd like to see some of those actual plays, but I want to. I'll just open this first one, but I'm going to come back to it. I don't want that yet. Not yet. So now we can go back. Okay, so now we have the next one up. Principled freeform and FKR. You end up seeing principled freeform referenced in some communities, but receiving a definition involves jumping from old form thread to old form thread and picking up the pieces. How to proceed? I have not heard of principled freeform before, so let me know if you have. MechJack says, this is an AMA. If I'm looking for another question, and I'm always looking for another question, what do my encounter notes look like? What do I write down? What do I discard? What do I hand wave during play? Okay, so oftentimes I don't have a ton of set encounters. I rely a lot on kind of what. So I guess to start off, so I rely myself on a lot of tables of things that could be around this area, and then using sort of I don't say overloaded, but using kind of in a sense wandering creature checks to determine what's there at any given time. Let me give an example. If you're on the floor of an office building, I might not have a set encounter for any particular room in the office building, but I might do something like, okay, if you're in the cubicle farm area, there's almost a 100% chance you're probably going to run into somebody. So I would say like it's a 5 out of 6 chance that there's someone's going to be there because this is a very highly trafficked area. And then okay, well, here are the creatures in the cubicle farm, just regular I don't know, what would we call them? Just everyday employees, management, janitorial staff, delivery people, that kind of thing, right? Okay, and then go from there. So I won't have a ton of notes on the specific encounter. Then I just try to look at what's going on. So then if the party's in the cubicle farm, there's a context for that. Do they fit? Are they someone who they decided that they're kind of they're acting like they're supposed to be there, and I'm presuming that they're not supposed to be there. They're maybe disguised or whatever they're doing. They're sneaking around. Okay, kind of, are they spotted or are they not? I just try to build the context around that and build, and then kind of go from there. So I try to basically have my notes or what I have kind of around the situation. Who's there? Why are they there? Either written down or in my mind. Sometimes I confess I'll kind of stick it in my mind and kind of have it on the back burner. I try to write it down. I do try to be better about that because I hate when I have a great idea and I forget. So writing that down. In terms of the kind of hand waving stuff, if I'm using something, so for example, one time I was rolling up a random encounter and the party was moving up a valley, or they're following a river course. It was up a valley. Yeah, they were following a river course through kind of a cut in some hills. They're trying to get to a certain spot. So they're coming up this thing. So I was rolling wandering monster check. I did not have a particular list for this area, and I ended up getting, what did I get? Did I get trolls? No, I got troglodytes. And I was thinking about it, and there was definitely the cave, troglodytes caves. I'm reading through their description, but I didn't quite like the caves part. I was like, not feeling the caves, but they were by this water thing, and so I went with this sort of idea, taking like as if they were sort of lizard beavers kind of thing. So I went with that sort of angle where they ran into a flooded area. They came across a flooded area that was kind of dammed, and there was sort of a beaver-like house thing, only it was made of like bones and body parts and skin and all kinds of flesh and bits of fur and all kinds of stuff that they made their home out of. And I put the encounter in there. So in that case, I did hand wave some things about what troglodytes, their usual places of habitation and things, because it didn't fit what I wanted at the time. Now it's my own fault because I could have come up with some things and I just didn't. I hadn't got to the point where I had my own customized wandering creature list. So I did hand wave the stuff that didn't fit, but I didn't hand wave it for like ease. I just kind of used it. I put a fresh coat of paint on it to fit what I wanted, and then once I had that, I kind of kept it as it was. So I try not to just hand wave stuff for kind of convenience, but if I need a troll, for example, but I don't really want a troll, but a troll comes up and I'm kind of sitting in the moment, that I might come up with, well, it's not a troll, but what kind of creature fits? And I'll kind of use, and I'll sort of try to do a really quickly sort of add, subtract, multiply from the troll stats, and then I'll kind of do that. And with old school stat blocks, it's usually pretty simple. It ultimately, if you took off the coat of paint I put on those creatures, they were troglodytes. They just didn't live in caves. I think the only thing, I think they had I didn't really have too much hand waving other than the fact that they don't live in caves. They live in these kind of huts, homes, whatever you would call them. So that's kind of how I do that. I don't tend to have a big list of things I'll hand wave, but I always try to look at the context. If the context indicates the party has done stuff that would then make something irrelevant, then it's relevant. And that would be the kind of hand waving that I would usually do. Oh, they've made a bunch of preparations and this and that and the other, so it doesn't make sense that this thing would happen. I'm like, well, I'm not going to roll to see if it happens because they've pretty much covered all their bases. There's a chance that someone might, they've, I don't know, gone up and climbed up a level or done something else. They go, oh, there's this chance that whatever see them, but the party was super careful and they went through all the things of, no, we've wiped our footprints off and we've done everything. And I'm like, yeah, they did a lot. So when the goblins come, like, now I don't think there's any reasonable chance that they're going to suddenly detect the party, because the party's done way beyond what the goblins would probably look for to be, if they're looking for somebody and the goblins aren't really looking for anybody. So I'll hand wave that. I hope that makes sense. McJack asks as a follow-up, do I have a mechanism to create compound encounters so the group runs into a troll and a batch of goblins? I don't have a particular thing. I mean, I kind of do. I've done some things with changing up how I'm rolling encounters, but I don't have a specific thing for compound. It's kind of maybe what makes sense. It's a good thing. I think it's good. So I think the compound encounters is interesting. I think it can also be something that can get. I wouldn't want every encounter to suddenly be a compound encounter. And what I believe MacJack is referring to a compound encounter, whereas the party comes in as like a third or fourth party to something that's coming on, right? That you run into some goblins, but it's not just goblins hanging out. It's goblins and they're currently doing something, like they're fighting a cave bear. So you run into this situation that's already sort of happening. And I've done that before, but I tend to just be like, oh, what are the goblins? Almost more lines of like, oh, what are the goblins doing? Oh, the goblins are hunting. Well, what if maybe they found something already? Because maybe the party had been, I think in a situation, let's say, for example, which has come before, the party was tracking an animal. They were just hunting. Tracking the animal, and I rolled a wandering creature check, and a giant or something they got on the creature check. So it turned out that the giant was also hunting the boar. I think it was a boar they were chasing, and they didn't end up finding the giant because of just I don't know. They had some misadventures in trying to do some of the tracking. So, but they were hearing things, and it was a situation where they could have come upon the giant and the boar in this kind of chase hunt scenario, but they didn't. They ended up coming up on the giant after the giant had already taken down the boar. But that was in play. And now it's because the context they were in was they're following these boar tracks. Wandering creature check gave me a giant. So I thought, well, the giant, what is he doing? maybe he's also been following the board tracks, but he's ahead of the party, or he's coming at the board from a different angle, or something. Like maybe there's multiple things going on, and so then I had them kind of come together. I don't have a specific mechanic for now roll two and combine, but I could see adding one in because it can be really fun and adds a lot of just flavor and nuance and just a whole different level of fun when you feel like you're coming into a situation that's sort of in progress. It's not about you; it's about something else. Mike Jack says, not always third party. Maybe the goblins are worshiping the troll as a god or somehow otherwise allied. Yeah, it could be. I mean, that'll usually. I think if there's something like that, you could certainly do it through a wandering creature check. I don't. Like, that would be more kind of context about the goblin. Maybe I will have rolled the troll earlier or rolled goblins earlier. And now I'm thinking kind of like what we did when we were putting together the AD&D using the Dungeon Master's Guide to do a hex map, where you just start looking at what's kind of stuff you've placed on the map, and then you start looking how do they relate to each other, and you think, oh, maybe these guys are either friendly or maybe they're fighting, or they could be allies, could be enemies, that kind of thing. I don't have a certain thing, but I can certainly see that. But and I certainly, if I'm trying to think about, well, what maybe defines these goblins or what makes them interesting, maybe they're having a troll. I mean, I think that all stuff's great. I don't have a set mechanic for doing it. I think at the moment it's kind of like what seems in the context of the moment that kind of makes sense and seems like fun. But I don't think there's anything wrong. I certainly would not be averse to having something to force some of those interesting things on there, because I think they are interesting and they add a lot of flavor. Whether, like you said, whether you're coming into some goblins that worship a troll, maybe you run into the troll and he's got these goblin acolytes surrounding him, or it's something like a conflict. I think you could probably just add a couple more dice to roll in terms of, oh, I'm rolling goblins, and you could add some tables about what are these folks doing. Are they just whatever vanilla goblins? Are they an interesting kind of side type of goblin? I don't know. But yeah, great. Thanks for the questions. Yeah, I think those are really neat stuff, and it would be really interesting to see a methodology to do that. My only thing I'd want to make sure of is that it's not happening too often, and it's not, and there's I guess in their case, it's not happening too often, because you don't want, to me, it's, you get that I mean, I guess it really depends on how gonzo you want things to be. I kind of like things pretty toned down. So if goblins are worshiping an orc, or say a troll rather, in this area, then I'd want that to be kind of a unifying feature for the goblins in this area, however big an area you want it to be, region, whatever. If there's not a reason for it, I might be weird of like, these goblins over here are doing this thing, but then these goblins that are 50 feet away are doing a whole totally different thing. Maybe that's part of the different factions, and maybe there's a story back there, but behind all these different goblins that are sort of become factionalized in all these different sub factions, which would be super interesting. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to get too kind of wackadoodle, because I think if I ran into something like that, I'd want to really use it, and I'd want it to really be something important about this area and not just a little like one-off nothing thing. Mac Jack says, related, he's been reading So You Want to Be a Game Master. He's got the concept of a dynamic dungeon where you never roll but just track your encounters in the setting as they move around. If they run into the party organically, then it's an encounter. Thoughts on that? Yeah, I mean, I like that a lot. I've done that a lot myself. I even talked about that a while back in some video or another, and just have, as you're getting close to areas, roll kind of a wandering creature check to see what's in the next area, and you can vary up the percentages given where you are. So you can roll up or down. Is it here it's 2 and 6, but there it's 3 and 6, and there it's 4 and 6, now it's 1 and 6 kind of thing. And then have different creatures that are in different areas that pop up. Because I think for the most part, there's very few places that there's always somebody in there. And sometimes I'll have fun with that, right? I always think of like the barracks room. There's always somebody in the barracks. You don't know how many are in the barracks, but there's always somebody in the barracks. And that kind of makes sense, because you think, okay, they got shifts of soldiers doing things. And so some number of their guards are going to be sleeping or getting dressed or undressed at any time. So probably that makes sense that there's always somebody there. But other places, there might not always be someone there, even in an office building. Certainly in the post-COVID world, walking through an area of an office that you think there must be people here, and then people are going to lunch, people are in meetings, and there's nobody there. And you kind of slip through and you're gone. And then you come back 5 minutes later and there's a bunch of people there. And it forces a couple things. I think it forces you to sort of think on your feet in terms of what's going on. I think it puts the encounters in interesting places because they're not just stuck in a place. Maybe I always love the encounters where they find you in a hallway or you find them in a hallway or coming around a corner, entering a room, exiting a room, in transit, all these different things on the stairs. Like, how many times do you encounter people on the stairs to another level? But why not? People, if you're taking the stairs to go from one level to the dungeon to the other, certainly other things must be, but you don't really think about encountering anybody there. It feels almost like a level transition where it's just like and you end up on level two. But why shouldn't there be things on the stairs, kind of thing? Um, and then as the party, I think there's more you can engage that logic. Well, where are we? Is this someplace that's going to be a lot of travel? Is this a main hallway or a main transit point? In which case, we're going to run into somebody, or can we find a side thing or something off the beaten path or something that we think might be emptier? And it's kind of more, in a way, rewarding for that, because if I'm being authentic, as they say in Muster, about what I'm doing things, if I say, yeah, if you're in this area, which is just maintenance stuff and nobody's there and it's kind of 1 in 6 chance, and I stick with that, then that is a really great choice for you. Whereas maybe it's 4 out of 6 in the main, I don't know, atrium of the place. All right, here. Principled freeform and FKR, which we started, I think. Or I'll start again. You end up seeing principled freeform referenced in some communities, but receiving a definition involves jumping from old forum thread to old forum thread and picking up the pieces. How to proceed. It's particularly interesting to me because as an FKR person, the discussion about quote unquote GMless FKR, an oxymoron, is recurrent, and principled freeform, capital P, capital F, is cited as the already existing definition for the non-FKR proposal. So it'll be useful for everyone to have a clear post about it. Procedural freeform and the difference will also be explained. Besides, principled freeform is very rewarding to play and deserves wider attention. Yeah, these terms are a little bit beyond me right now, so I'm looking forward to getting them defined. The term and definition will point towards McGee, sorry, apologies for that, and Vincent Baker, the authors of Apocalypse World, and Emily Care Boss, among many other things, the coiner of the term bleed, due to their development and naming of this process. Their game using this framework ran from 1998 to 2005, although surely it was already practiced by other people before them. I'd like to leave a preemptive apology to them if I skip some important point in those threads, as I don't mean to distort their words or diminish their research. All the pulled quotes in this post are sick. In writing this, I took care to define it through the information presented on the threads and supplementary information, and made the decision of not utilizing old theory jargon that is either outdated or that can't be explained for our purposes in simpler manner. Stopping to define terms, especially outdated ones like GNS, could only muddle the conversation in 2023. All right, so now we're going. What is it? Here's to start. Designing a game means changing people's normal social system. Luke and Jared call it mind control. When you design a game, you do it to supplant the normal, natural interactions, relationships, and considerations of its players with new, unnatural, designed interactions, relationships, and considerations. You could change people's normal social system with content. Your character is the captain of a spaceship. Mine is their first mate. You can change people's normal social system with principles. Your right to say what your character does ends at my character's skin. You can say your character punches mine, but I get to say how it affects my character. You can change people's normal social system with procedural cues. We roll dice. If you have the highest sum, you get to say what happens. Procedural cues tell you how to interact without reference to the content of the fiction you're creating. You can change people's normal social system with mediating cues, popular in mechanics. When your character does something that would expose her to danger, stop. Roll dice for her. I'm craven. If the high die is 1 to 3, she's too craven to do it. That's a quote by Vincent Baker. Vincent thankfully left this reference for us to understand the conception of freeform used here. While each person may agree or balk at these definitions, I will operate from them to explain principled freeform and how it's different from FKR. So then, freeform. Freeform versus non-freeform means no mediating cues versus mediating cues. Freeform versus structured freeform means content only versus content plus principles, procedural cues, or both. Principled freeform versus structural freeform, hereafter procedural freeform, means content plus principles versus content plus procedural cues with principles optional. So, principled freeform would mean a game or a subsystem of a game that changes its player's social system by using only content and principles. Procedural freeform goes one further, using formal structures like narration, trading, time limits, counters, non-representational pieces on a board, improv games, and who knows what else, but never crossing that line into mechanical mediation. Before we unpack this, this is another thing from Vincent Baker, by the way. Before we unpack this, I'd like to define another term coined by Vincent Baker and Emily Care-Boss that supplements this, the Lumpley principle, also called Baker-Care or Baker-Boss. The most popular definition is that system is how the group agrees to imaginary events. This includes the choice of written rule set, conversational patterns, agreed play objectives, and such. Incidentally, the Lumpley principle is what quote-unquote system matters is supposed to mean, but cross-wire conversation leads to system matters being written and possibly commercial rule set matters. And that's the position people are arguing in favor or against in pretty much every conversation about system matters. The Lumpley principle will eventually be invoked, but only after one of the sides feel like they started to lose and want to redefine the agreed definition until that point. Let's look at that definition of principled freeform, or freeform that uses content, the fictional world and premise, and the laws of engagement the players agree. You may notice that it doesn't mention a GM figure as requirement, nor for it or freeform at large. The play reports of the Ars Magica-based freeform campaign that the Bakers and Care played indicate that GMing, more exactly the roles associated with GMing, was a shared function during play, ever shifting during the sessions without centralization of authority regarding the world or rulings to uncertain situations beyond the players deliberating among themselves, and occasional use of the dice as oracular suggestions to be interpreted. I'd add a caveat that it's wrong to say that people who search for GMless FKR are necessarily searching only for principled freeform. I think they may also be interested in procedural freeform, as Vincent defines it, depending on their preferences for how to negotiate the fiction. What those share for our purposes ends up being unnecessary. I'm not sure I get that one. What those share for our purposes ends up being unnecessity. And according to play reports, a preference for the absence of a central referee figure during play, which is the exact opposite of FKR. All right. I'm not sure I'm getting everything, but I'm gonna just go on ahead. FKR versus principled or procedural freeform, and why the confusion. Well, let's make something clear that is in fact the reason for this blog post. Finding the definitions and play reports and such through the many forum threads Vincent collected in the A Background on Principled Freeform post is quite the endeavor. Besides the term falling in some obscurity compared to the present moment of FKR in certain communities, there's that as one origin of the confusion. Second, although we are defining system for our purposes under the Lumpley principle, we can all agree that in common parley, we think system as written rule set. So it seems like freeform, principled or not, is the same as FKR regarding relationship to written rule sets. Not quite. The freeform presented in the play reports is concerned to some extent with the relationship between all the players and a written rule set or the absence of it, which is different from the FKR preoccupation with the relationship between the rule set and specifically the referee. Freeform and FKR have productive dialogue with each other, but are not the same. And here we have a quote from Emily Care. Using improvised system, our group engages in a lot of exploration of system. Hitting walls like that give us the clue that we need to use a different technique. And if the next one we try doesn't work, we modify it or use another until we are satisfied that the ball is nicely pumped. We don't have a pre-constructed structure for our drama, but instead develop system elements as we find we need them. Emily's comment here emphasizes the difference, lack of referee, but also points out a similarity between the usual practice of FKR and principled and others freeform, the development of system as a campaign progresses. However, FKR does not demand that, as explained in previous essays, although it can easily cause confusion to see the same procedure of emerging codified techniques in both styles. And here's another quote by Emily Care. I use the term primary character because there are technically no non-player characters. We all GM and we all play. In my opinion, the closest thing we have to NPCs are characters who we use to help protagonize others. either by helping or being an obstacle, etc. Another example of the referee-player fluid structure. While I commented on the possibility of multiple referees in an FKR campaign, sharing the world and running sessions in different parts of it, in no case the same structure emerges. Also notice the shared vision of characters described in one of the threads. Instead of the characters being the sole purview of a regular FKR player has in the world, and they don't define other characters as well, since they're not in a GMing roles rotation during single play. Whew, boy, I feel like I'm reading Muster 2.0. As this is another quote from Emily Kerr, a system that took us longer to let go of. We did start out with classic AM. I'm not sure what AM means, or rather using a homebrew version that Vincent pretty much cooked up. At least that's how I recall it. And we slowly moved away from using particular mechanics that we'd been using, through to using description and discussion to figuring things out, which is still our primary resolution system, to now suggesting dice and other mechanics on the fly or using ones we found useful in the past. The rebellion against rule sets as primary source of play and the employment of technology heavily associated with FKR, description and logic to figure things out, suggests association as well as resolution procedures on the fly. But in FKR, that's the purview of the referee. Here's a quote from Vincent Baker. When we played with Aeneid, apologies for the butchering, our Bohemian days indeed, the GMs, Kip and Sarah, while I was playing, did the same, but to GURPS. Maybe Kip used GURPS dice and Sarah didn't even. I think she mostly just rolled 2d6, low, bad, high, good, and interpreted them to the characters and situation. We had GURPS character sheets we never referred to. I'll call that the Israelian game. As I look back, that game was far more collaborative than anybody acknowledged. The GM had yay or nay authority, but the social dynamic was such that a nay would have been outrageous. Generally, each player had domains of authority, and the GM would rubber stamp whatever we said within our domains. As a newcomer, my personal domains didn't extend much past my characters. While this refers to a game that predates the Ars Magica campaign, it was mentioned and is brought again here because its description of collaboration through a social dynamic that minimizes the GM predates it. However, it is interesting to notice the lack of reference to sheets and Sarah's use of that oracular dice as things associated with FKR, and very common, but diminishing the role of the referee under the dynamics in a way that indicates the future definitions of freeform. All right. I feel like I went down a rabbit hole I wasn't quite trying to go through. Let's see. Okay. And here's another quote, this time by McGee Baker. Gosh, I feel like I'm just butchering that name. As for collaborative play, I think it was probably connected to the Israelian game and the multiple GMs that there was my first real exposure to joint jamming. I'd run AM, Ars Magica. Okay. I'd run an AM game, Kyr Maraborn, in college that was pretty standard GM players division. In the Israelian game, there were so many people playing that the GM wasn't always privy to the discussions of all the characters. It was common for the GM to be dealing with an interaction on one side of the room, while on the other side, two players sat totally in character having important IC discussions that then would get summed up for the GM when it was convenient. This was wild and woolly at the time, because shouldn't the GM know all? The idea that characters didn't need to freeze until the GM got back to them was huge, natural, and led directly to collaborative play or co-GMing. All right. And then the note here is not conceivable in FKR. Now we have another quote from Emily Kerr. However, though we do have a strong commitment to consistency or verisimilitude, it's a flexible one. It's defined by what we find to be pleasing rather than by some external standard of what should be true or consistent or realistic, etc. For example, we are simultaneously committed to world consistency, active authoring, and openness to retroactive change. Here's the biggest departure besides lack of a referee. Despite Emily mentioning the commitment to world consistency, and obviously from past quotes using the world as reference to what goes next, this and other quotes indicate that consistency is pursued if it doesn't contradict what is pleasing now, and what the play reports indicate as most pleasing is narrative play, narrative in quotes. I'm not saying that retroactive change can't happen in FKR. The referee is not infallible. Come on. And that interest can't change. But there's a difference of priorities that organize play between FKR and play reports. Here's another quote from Emily Kerr. And just a comment about the dice mechanic. I see the dice we rolled as giving us more material to work with rather than being used to determine resolution. As you said, Vincent, we knew they weren't going to bite it. What a waste that would have been. But it made it easier for us to come up with a believable, to us anyway, sequence of actions since we had the dice results to interpret. The numbers we rolled on the dice gave us a structure or put the players in some kind of relative ranking. We had to make sense of the differences, and we did so in ways that gave us ideas for the plot or characters' development, etc. Make sense? This is just a compliment regarding the use of oracular dice that also matches FKR practices, another possible source of confusion. Who doggy? All right, let's get to the conclusion here. The many types of freeform here established and FKR don't have compatibility, but they do meet at points. And someone who was unaware of these types but finds common technologies may believe that GMless FKR and other things are possible. They are possible, but they're not FKR. They are also great. Principled or procedural freeform is a blast. It's amazingly fun for people who have a taste for it, and I highly recommend you try it if it appeals to you. It appeals to me personally. I just wanted to make the difference clear without sending people in a wild goose chase. Same intent in their FKR posts, and introduce them to a style that may interest them. It's also meant to conclude a few terminology discussions that are unproductive. All right. I was kind of hoping to, I feel like that's opened up a whole nother kettle of fish in the freeform part. I can't say I've played a bunch of freeform. Okay, there's another article here. Freeform type games, though, the long running sci-fi game that I played in, it had very little. I mean, there was no system document. In many ways, it was very black box. The GM would mostly using percentile based, and he had a couple other mechanics kind of in the bag, but there was no set numbers. We generally would roll those percentile, and he would ponder the situation and things like the technology we're using, because this was a sci-fi game, so we had tech levels and things we're using that much, and then come to a number, maybe roll an opposing number, and that kind of thing. Hey, Hunter. So that's kind of how we did it. So I wouldn't say it was totally, but he was certainly a GM. So maybe it would almost be more. Gosh, now I'm confusing. This whole thing's confusing me about what is FKR. Now maybe that would be somewhat FKR, but I mean we had character sheets, but the character sheets didn't have statistics so much. It was really more inventory or special abilities, because all that other stuff didn't really matter. We were so far forward in the future that it was kind of assumed that we were all sort of essentially perfectly genetically. If our particular species had something interesting about it, then we would note that down. But it wasn't like we were tracking our strength, agility, whatever. I think we might have even had numbers there, but I can't remember ever looking at them. It was really a case where the important thing on our characters is really what is the gear we're carrying, because it was very much kind of gear driven in terms of what's really important is our tech, because we're playing again a sci-fi game, so the tech is really important. It'd be interesting to kind of break it down and see where it fits, because I played it for a long time. It was very much fun. It was not GMless and it was not co-GMing, but we did have some kind of world building things we could do with our own kind of empire domains. We kind of had freedom to do some world building in there if we wanted to, but we weren't actively changing things in terms of things that were affecting the rest of the world. It was more just limited to our own backstory, because very rarely did things take place in our home empires. We were almost always adventures out somewhere else. All right, so let's get back to FKR and this part on FKR and abstraction. My thesis here is that an arbitrary attribute of a rule set like length or math crunch should not be used as a determining factor regarding its utility to FKR play. To present it, I will go over 3 points: why freeform and ultralight are associated so strongly with the FKR, how so-called quote-unquote crunchy rule sets can be used by FKR referees without any dissonance, and a direct example of a famous RPG extraction being applied to hypothetical FKR play. I believe case studies greatly strengthen hypotheses. All right, so first up, on freeform and ultralight. Freeform and ultralight rules are associated with the FKR and confused with inherent qualities or principles of it, because they offer 2 frameworks which can be used to understand FKR play. Freeform offers the concept of principles and conversational patterns being the dominating tool for resolution within a table, which is true of all RPGs, and freeform is the purest expression of this essence as shaped into superstructure. Freeform is also associated with many collaborative techniques which help teaching the group to negotiate the fiction. Although freeform exercises that share authority between members are immediately not FKR, because the sole authority of the referee is essential for its many moving parts to cohere into a single object. So basically, it's a concept of, at least here, the idea that FKR requires a referee, which was, I mean, my understanding of it, going back to what I understood of the Free Kriegspiel, whatever, seemed to indicate that a referee was part of that system. But it seems like that in the community, I guess it's a lot more fluid. And I think a lot of these articles are trying to take some of these ways that the community is not exactly agreed, and try to suss out kind of things as being one or another, trying to, basically do some kind of organizing of thoughts, ideas, and principles. Ultralight rule sets, meanwhile, are read as ultimate blueprints that create a sensation of vastness to be filled, and therefore understood as ideal to FKR, since their gaps are enticing for fictional principles and world building, while supported with very simple procedures. They serve as a symbol for the construction of a table-centric system, and they're rather simple to get across to players if the referee doesn't desire to use a black box style of gaming. Black box gaming being keeping all the abstractions and resolution mechanics besides conversation unknown to the rest of the table, without overwhelming players. Both are used as tools for FKR play. Neither is FKR, because FKR is not inherently freeform, or at least not more than any play style or play experience is, and because rule sets are not FKR, only the referee can proclaim their utility for the table. The outlined above are just reasons they are so heavily associated, besides ultralight systems being classified as FKR. They are, however, objects that can be pointed out as carrying associations with certain practices that are relevant to FKR play. Oh boy, these very dense, highly kind of technical articles, they're really interesting, but I always feel like I need to read them 3 times. I almost wish someone would come and kind of maybe put them a little more plainly, so it doesn't batter my tongue as I'm trying to read them on the streams. My central theory about the confusion of automatic association hinges on an aspect that people believe numerical abstractions don't model the fictional world, that they always do so poorly. To present this point, I want to offer the antithesis and demonstrate there's no contradiction between it and FKR, which I believe will sustain the argument that while freeform and ultralight don't contradict it, they aren't more or less proper as tools for it as well. Ryan Smith says, this is drier, denser than some overcooked Thanksgiving turkey. Yes. It really is. Oh, they're going to bring riffs into it? Oh, man, I feel like I need to crack my neck for this. Okay, the R in FKR is Rifts. Rollmaster, Harnmaster, Hackmaster, Palladium Systems, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, First Edition, Mithras, and basic role-playing at large. Warhammer roleplay, both fantasy and 40K. These and more traditional systems are known at large in the community, with fans and detractors as it's natural. Detractors, however, may not be focused on a specific rule set, but their shared position of crunchy. If someone refers to crunchy, one can assume what they mean is one or more combination of the following. The rule set uses a significant amount of math for its procedures. Those procedures are themselves extremely specific. The rule set is too densely integrated between procedures to navigate without constant reference. If we go from the perspective of FKR as being inherently connected to freeform and ultralight gaming, the idea of such rule sets being used by a referee, having large chunks of them being used no less, seems absurd. I believe this is a misunderstanding of the relationship referees have to rulebooks. Rulebooks are to be used whatever way the referee sees fit to simulate their world. I mean, I think that's a key point, and I think one of the things, the differentiators between, I think, a lot of the OSR and to a degree the kind of old school mindset and the kind of new school mindset, because you don't see, say, an OSR forum, certainly lots of arguments, disagreements, and lively discussion, but it doesn't tend to be rules as written versus rules as intended kind of thing, because it's understood that we only really care about rules as interpreted and by the GM, like rules as understood by the GM, or whatever the GM basically saying. You don't see a lot of people going and pointing at paragraphs and trying to do, a quote, a page, paragraph, and line number for Cairn when someone's playing. It's kind of like, well, we could say, well, by default, Cairn does this, but your GM is probably doing this other thing, or they have a house. It's very much a whole different kind of discussion. So I think that ethos of, hey, the rule books are tools, they're not the be all end all, certainly exists. Whereas you get to something like 5th edition, And you very much see all kinds of arguments in which it is clearly important to both sides of the discussion. What are the rules as written? And if it's rules as intended, it's not intended by me as the GM or by the players, but by the all-knowing designers. What does Jeremy Crawford say is the intention behind that rule? As Hunter points out, though, bullet points are where it's at. Yes, like more bullet points would be grand. This is a coherent idea to the definition of FKR, but why it isn't emphasized? Several factors at play. First, again, the publication of FKR rule sets. All that tends towards having very few procedures murk this point. Second, and this is mere speculation, from watching many discussions go, some have a dislike for the crunchy systems. I share that version myself, which ends up being mixed through cross-wire conversation with the idea that they're unfit for FKR as a concept, instead of simply unfit for what each referee wants to use for their campaign. Third, and this comes back to a misconception I pointed out in my first essay, that there's the impression that many codified procedures through abstract mathematics and rules are against the in-world principle, despite abstraction in no way contradicting the fictional world a priori. Therefore, those crunchy rule sets seem to be a way of putting distance between the table and the fictional world, instead of a method the referee could use for consistency and to carry out situations expected to recur. While I also pointed out in my essay that simple, direct statements are an important piece of FKR technology for many, due to the way it maintains focus in certain conversational patterns and are easy to reference, this does not mean other technologies are illegitimate. I mean, I think the bottom line is, I'm sort of gonna scroll through here. I think the bottom line with FKR, and there seem to be multiple ways with FKR. When I asked somewhere on kind of FKR definitions, I got a bunch of different ones. I think there are. It's interesting because part of what brought me back to this FKR and reading a couple of these articles, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of me. I was on the OSR Discord, and I missed some conversation overnight about FKR by the person. I don't know if they started it or they just were commenting in it, by the person who wrote these articles, who was showing or explaining how in FKR circles there's this arguments about defining FKR. What exactly is FKR? Which I think has led them, or they've been driving at in somewhat with these different essays, is trying to basically put forth what could be established some concept that can be used to really talk about FKR in a constructive way without everyone seeing it differently. And I remember I even commented this morning how it's like, boy, it's like they didn't learn from what's happening with OSR, because that's the same problem that OSR has, right? Where you get 3 people in a room and ask them what the OSR is, and they all have slightly or more different takes about what it is. And it hasn't gotten better, even though the OSR has been around for a long time now, in terms of kind of movements or eras of gaming. Hasn't really gotten much better. And it has led to, I mean, lots of YouTubers making lots of content, and I can't discount myself from that conversation, that get to mine views about what FKR is, but or what OSR is rather, but it doesn't lead to a lot of fruitful talk. Like, for all the times folks have sitting there and defined, redefined, and asked about what is OSR, what is that? What is it actually? How's it actually done? How's it actually helped anybody? It hasn't really, right? It's either maybe settled some confusion, probably caused some other confusion. Bryce with asked, is FKR is Franklin Delano Roosevelt? That would be good. I like that. And I think the same thing is happening with FKR, with certain people bringing in certain aspects and kind of, what is it? I felt like for me, when I was, and I'm still just, I don't feel like I'm in the deep end of it yet. I mean, these articles are certainly over my head in a way where I'll have to read them 3 or 4 more times to really get through and internalize all the terms and how they're being used. But this idea of the players, more or less, that kind of black box approach, which I'd heard a couple times now very recently, and I don't remember hearing before. And I'd heard, the procedure I understand because I've heard that before, but not as black box. But the idea is that you as the players aren't really privy to the mechanics. GM handles the mechanics behind the screen. All you have to deal with your in-world stuff. You just say, okay, my thief climbs the wall. And you're not looking at your climb score. You don't know what maybe your climb score is. You don't know anything. It's like, all right, you deal with everything in the fiction. Oh, I check out the walls that seem to have handholds and things. Oh, the GM says, oh, yes, it does. And okay, well, I put on my ninja climbing gloves, whatever they're called, and and put on my spiked shoes, and I just start using your handhold, doing it. Okay, that's great. And then the GM has the mechanics on their side, roll some dice, or just whatever. Says, yeah, you make it up the wall. Oh, you do a little bit, and whatever, and that happens. And that was kind of my feeling coming into of what FKR was. And so, from my understanding, RPG Grandma has an Xmas party, Christmas party lunch. Awesome, enjoy. She wishes she could share. I wish I could eat some. So that was my understanding of FKR. That it was kind of this black boxy style approach. That as players, you wouldn't have to worry about all those things. You have somebody who can do it, and also because of maybe the rules you're using. I think where the rules light things comes in, because when I was thinking back to that idea that Free Creeks will begin with, it was kind of as referee as a acknowledged expert, so they would kind of know the rules. And I think if you're getting into the rules knowledge bit, if you're using a rules light system, the path to system mastery is a lot simpler. So you can go from I don't really know too much to I'm comfortable pretty quickly. Whereas if I was using something super crunchy, like I was going to run, if I was a madman, and I'm going to run a black box first edition AD&D with all the DMG trimmings, and I'm not using a VTT, so I'm doing all the stuff myself. That's a long, hard path to go to try to get to a system mastery point where, without having to do a bunch of lookups, without having to slow the table down, that I can kind of do things fast. If I'm running more of a BX style thing and I'm just kind of using a flat sort of X and 6 type thing, like, yeah, I could probably do that. I could probably play a game where I just had the character sheets and their kind of stuff and just figure it out. It's like, okay, and I can just roll a 6-sided die, feeding off the fiction in terms of, like I said before, advantage, disadvantage, whatever, and boom, rolling dice and then going. But it seems like there's a lot more to the FKR than just kind of the idea of running it sort of black box. And it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if it's getting more. I mean, it's not like it's a super new thing. It's just kind of came to my attention relatively recently. But I guess as it's getting more attention, like, how is it going to interact with more people being aware of it? Like I said, the OSR, I think, didn't do a very good job when in that part. And it doesn't seem like FKR is learning from that approach to try things differently. But of course, it's not a single person, right? It's not a single entity. Like OSR is not a single entity. So trying to get a whole bunch of people to agree on these things that are very personal, very potentially fraught with investment and emotion is probably asking too much. It's just kind of interesting now to see it from the outside as opposed to being more on the inside. See down on the outside how these things can, these sorts of, I don't even know what I want to call it, factionalization, I guess, of terminology and of just the meaning and things can take place. RPG says, too crunchy for a GM can slow a game down. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, there is a point where, like I said, unless you've got really good system mastery or you've created a whole bunch of tools that you can hit at point and buttons, there are probably some rule sets that are too crunchy for most people to run as kind of an FKR style sort of black box game. Not that it's impossible, because I'm sure there are people out there who've internalized a whole bunch of AD&D and can rattle off different things. And especially if you start to kind of, again, you can kind of trim a lot of the fat down and just getting rid of certain subsystems and doing things where you can make kind of slim and trim. Like, I think white box D&D or BX, I think you could, if you wanted to kind of do it in that black box kind of way, you totally could. But it's interesting. Interesting indeed. So we got some more stuff on FKR, but I feel like I'm sort of all out. Let's see. I got a little bit of time. Hey, Dave, don't worry about being late. Just been kind of noodling around here. Read some stuff on FKR, but it kind of is really dense. So I'll have to come back to it and read it again. I had some FKR, an actual play, but I'm not. Let's see something else. So I'll look at a couple of these. So there are a couple of these. Somebody posted a couple of classes for OSR. I don't know. Maybe if they're. I don't know if they're. Let me see. Where is it? I guess they just had these two. So I thought these might be fun to look at real quick. Of course, if you guys have comments, questions, you have anything you want to discuss, let me know. I still got a little bit of time, so I can go a bit longer. All right, so this is a class. This is posted to pressthebeast.blogspot.com, and this is a druid OSR class. No more human than you are beast. To exchange the future for eternity is to become a druid. Fall in love with the moon and turn your back on the churning of mankind. Your grandma says at one point they had 1E ADD memorized. I believe it. I'm sure there are folks out there that still have it pretty well memorized. Hey, Terrence, haven't seen you in a while. When choosing your languages, you may select the tongue of beasts, birds, reptiles, bugs, and plants. You do not grow old, and your appearance changes with the seasons. Thick vegetation parts before you. A druid may consume monsters, beasts, and plants to take on their features. This is called gestalt. You may gestalt a number of features equal to half your level. A gestalt lasts for 1 hour. A single unit of food results in 1 gestalt. 1 unit of food is enough for 1 day. A lonely spider is not enough. You must eat handfuls. Ugh. All right. You may gestalt a number of features equal to half your level. A gestalt lasts for 1 hour. A single unit of food results in 1 gestalt. 1 unit of food is enough for food for 1 day. Sapphire Ridge says, do you turn into an iron ration? I suppose it's possible. If you eat one, I suppose you could. All right. So the kind of gestalts they have listed here. So bark, gain defense is chainmail, but I guess you got to be aware of flames. I guess you become, though I don't think bark actually doesn't burn that well. Trees are, I think they're harder to burn than people give them credit for. Claws and fangs, you deal damage as a sword. Crab claws, crab claws. You get to get a grapple attack. Tentacles, you can attack again with tentacles, very flexible. I don't know what that again means. Yeah, more than one attack. Whoops. What does that mean? Horse, gain the lower body and movement of a horse to become a centaur for an hour. Web, flexible and sticky. You can expertly manipulate it, but others will be stuck. Do you produce this web? I feel like they're missing a little bit where they could. It's in some spots they're telling you. So this one, like they could, I would have been fine actually just gain the movement of a horse, but here they basically transform. This one, I'm guessing it means that you're able to create a web, though where it's coming out of, or I suppose you can determine, or your gym can roll where this web is coming from. Clamshell, you gain a +1 shield. Bird, you can fly. That one seems a little too easy because birds, I mean, any bird, just eat some turkey, fly. Terrence says you gain a horse's ass, I suppose. Bloodhound, you can track on a 3 and 6 if you can pick up a scent. I would have thought that tracking on a 3 and 6 means that you picked up a scent. That seems like it. You don't need a double. You don't need a double roll. Just roll. You track on a 3 and 6, which would indicate that you picked up a scent. Dave says chickens can't fly though, but that's my point. It doesn't say what kind of bird. But even if I were to pick quail or something else that can fly, it just seems like I could just go to the grocery store. I mean, I want these things to be a bit more. You got to go kind of out there and get them, and not just be, oh, I've got some quail that in your old medieval market I could just purchase. Like either you got to kill it yourself, something's gonna happen. I feel like I would want to be something that is engaged. You have to be out somewhere dangerous to do, and not that you can just order at the inn. I'll take that. I'll take that quail à l'orange, and then something I can fly. Aaron says, alternate bird, you can regurgitate food into children's mouths. Yes, that's the one we want. Actually, Terrence, it should be something like you can regurgitate food that is like a healing, acts as a healing potion, but someone has to eat it directly from your mouth. Now that's gross. So here you get eagle eyes, so at least eagle, right? Okay, so maybe I would change that to something like, I don't know, giant hawk or something. Chameleon, you can hide on a 4 and 6 if you're still, or night vision. How do you eat? You don't eat night vision. What an owl? I mean, what are we eating here? Eagle eyes, see far and improved accuracy with ranged attacks. Fire breath, breathe fire like the monster you consume. Damage may be reduced due to your size. In a fight, a druid is as handy as any cleric. Armor may restrict the ability to gestalt. Experience needed to level is as a magic user. That's all right. I mean, I like it. I think it could be fleshed out a little bit more. I'd like these to be more unusual because again, I don't want to just go to the buffet at the ye old Golden Corral and suddenly gain all kinds of abilities. So I'd want it to be more unusual or just rare, or somehow I got to go get it. And it could just be as much as it's got to come from the wilderness, can't be domesticated, and you have to get it yourself. So even that a horse, it's got to be a wild horse kind of thing, right? Or, don't just pick, giant spiders, give you a web. Clamshell, you got to eat it. Is there any, I guess you have this ability to eat things so you can just crunch on stuff no matter what. Maybe it's got to be a giant clam. Something like that. Something like that. They ate a cat. Yep. Brian Smith says they played a game with ciphers. One time used magic items, produced healing sweat for 1 minute. Of course, I bottled it and ran around giving my buddies swigs throughout the dungeon. So it goes. Gross. And then Terrence says Golden Corral ability gained. Bubble guts. And the Dave says you're eating glue. It's made from horses. Well, it's made from a bunch of stuff. So I think if you eat glue, it might be horse. It might be something else. So yeah, I think I'd want to add, like I said, I think the one thing I probably want to do is I'd want to be a little bit more specific with some of these. And I'd want to add that they got to be in the wild, not domesticated. You have to do the finding, you have to do the hunt. The hunt is the thing. The action is the juice. The hunting is the thing. So you can't just go and get it from the market, go to the supermarket, the 7-Eleven, and grab it. But other than that, nice. Here we have another one for the priest. Thinking about an alternative to the magic user or cleric called the priest. What makes the priest unique is that when prepping spells, they need to create talisman, which are then stored in their inventory. Talisman are made out of a special paper, which costs 1 gold piece per paper. A priest also needs to have a brush and ink. Talisman can be lent to other players, and if the spell lasts indefinitely, they can be maintained for as long as the talisman remains whole. I want to say that we saw that in, what was that magic system? Gob had something similar, but I think it could use a better word, because talisman to me, I think of not paper. Is not the thing I think of when I think of talisman. But regardless. When resting, each spell slot can be used to make 1 talisman. If there are any active spells out in the world, the priest can choose the magic effect or maintain it. If they maintain it, then they do not recover the spell slot for that talisman. The priest is able to accurately throw a talisman up to 20 feet away. Allies can also hold talisman and place them for the priest, but the priest must still activate the spell. Yeah, again, like it's paper, so are they you making little paper throwing stars? How are you tossing, you just pulling the paper up and tossing it? 20 feet, it can be kind of tough to throw some paper. So making it into an actual physical thing with a little bit of weight to it actually works better for that. Terrence says it's very Chinese ghost story. Yeah, there's a lot of those kind of wuxia sort of things that have things written on papers and people using little papers and things, but maybe think a little bit differently about that. Or maybe you can, instead of saying you could throw the paper some funny way, like you can just, I would just think, I wouldn't even have this here. I would just be like, if you can attach the paper to something like a rock or an arrow or a spear or a hammer or throwing hammer or throwing axe, then do it and just have people have fun with that, or just a stick, something, as opposed to the throw the paper. Priests also have the ability to talk to the dead, or just make sure that it's like a magical thing, like you were able to, and it's kind of like a mystical effect, which would be that kind of following that Chinese ghost story kind of deal. Priests also have the ability to talk to the dead. They may put their hand on any corpse and ask it a single yes or no question. Additionally, they are able to speak freely with any undead creature, such as a ghost or a zombie. Well, that's super interesting. What would the zombie say? In order to learn spells, the priest must find a scroll with the spell and memorize it. The following stats can easily be adapted for any OSR game. Just use the stats as magic user. I prefer to have a unified saving throw regardless of system. And the following chart is presumed to be rollover like OSE. Combat priests are as magic users, but they may also use a bow and affix a talisman to arrows. Yeah, see, that makes sense. I don't know if I like using a priest. I don't know. I guess it depends on your conception of priest. Priest using bows seems a little bit weird, but certainly a sling seems very sling-stony. RPG Grandma says they've seen many different kinds of religious prayer talismans, wood, metal, parchment, and so on. I just don't, it's probably my just conception of the word talisman. Maybe other people have different ones. I just don't see it as paper. I would just kind of maybe want to think of a different word, but that's me. All right. I mean, and I'd get over it soon enough. So here we have the spells. I'm not going to read a bunch of these spells unless they're somehow different. So alter self, I think we got that one. Psychic. So basically, it's like a sending stone. Hold person, essentially. Fireball. Electrize. Shocked by electricity. Pass wall. Animate. Animate dead, basically. Breathe air. Sapphire Ridge is a talisman, a locket, or trinket. Yeah, that's what I think of anyway. And maybe you could argue that you could make a locket or trinket out of paper. But to me, it just as a scroll, I just think of let them be scrolls. Let them be a particular kind of scroll. And maybe even, as Terrence was pointing out, the Chinese ghost story, maybe there's a phrase for some of those little paper with a particular kind of, Chinese, the kind of the writing, calligraphic sort of writing. I don't know. Maybe there's a name for that. You can kind of play on that a little bit. I don't know. It's me just noodling away at that term because I personally don't love it for this. They're called tags. Okay. That would make sense too. Let's see. Illuminate. All right. Lock, cure, protection from evil. All right. I mean, I like it. I don't know about using the bow, but I would give them a sling. Origami. Yeah. Origami. Doing some origami could be cool. Absolutely. Origami could be awesome. Yeah. Kind of mine some different things. I like the idea of as you have to spend some time. So kind of like if you use the rules, like with clerics, somebody has to pray for their spells in the morning. The priest doesn't have to pray, but they have to create those talismans, or they have to imbue the talismans with spells, and then those are the kind of spells they have. Paper airplanes, you whip at your enemy. But Brian Smith, do those paper airplanes work like paper airplanes usually do, where they end up turning back on yourself because you made a crappy paper airplane, so it goes out a foot, either dive bombs into the ground or comes around and comes back at you? That would be good. So that was also on pressthebeast.blogspot.com. Kudos. Nice work. So here's, I guess, so we're talking about the New Year's coming up. And I've seen a few things. So we had Dungeon 23. So one thing I've seen was Explore 24, which first got my attention in a big way. But it has to do with hexes but it has to do with kind of solo playing through regions in the world, which may or may not include actual creation of hexes. I like the idea of doing like a wilderness kind of overworld version of Dungeon 23 kind of thing. And I might try to formalize that in some way. I'm not sure. But I guess there's also Lore 24, which I hadn't seen before. Terrence said they always wanted to play a summoner flavor that's bringing origami to life. That's cool. Yeah, that'd be really neat to have. That'd be very cool. I don't know how you would. I'm curious how we would mechanize the origami thing, but that seems like a neat idea. You should write it up, Terrence. All right, so this came originally from Spriggan's Den. So let's look at the Spriggan's Den thing first. Lore 24. It's now only 3 weeks. Now only 3 more weeks until the start of 2024. So it's probably high time to get some promotion for this idea going. I think most people in the DIY RPG space are familiar with Dungeon 23, the big project to write up one room for a big mega dungeon every day for all of 2023. While it was hugely popular, at least on Macedon, in January, February, coming up with a whole new dungeon room every day was a mighty ambitious plan. A few people seem to have made it nearly all the way to the end now, but most have dropped out long ago. And I heard from several other people that they also never started with it because the whole thing seemed just too big from the start. A few weeks back, we had some conversations on Macedon about doing something similar in 2024, but for world building on a campaign setting instead of rooms for a mega dungeon. The whole idea is fairly simple and straightforward. All right, so now we got some bullets. Come up with a general concept for a new campaign setting, or take any setting you already have done some work on and want to expand upon. For every day in 2024, write up a description of one thing that exists in that world. Could be a place, a creature, a spell, a character, an item, a deity, an event, or whatever you can think of. The purpose of it all is to practice turning vague ideas in your mind into concrete words that can be shared with other people. The entry of the day should, of course, be something that you've written up on that day, but the idea that you're describing does not necessarily have to be a completely new one. It could just be as well just as well be an old idea that you never got properly put into words before. The entry of the day can take any length or format, could be as short as a post on Mastodon or a full page description with stats for your game system of choice, or anything in between. Okay, I'm going to read. So that's basically the thoughts on it, which seems cool. I like that idea. So basically, it's just you're picking something in your world to write about it, and you do one a day for 365 days, which means you can really go with whatever thing strikes your fancy about, and that you're a new setting or an existing setting. I think it's a great way to kind of do little bits of world building at a time. They can either be connected or not connected. If you have a game that you're running, it can be something that's coming up, right? It's anything will count. You just get a little bit done. As Taryn says, that sounds way more doable. Yes. Indeed. Okay. And now we have a prompt calendar if you want one. This is posted to licheslibrum.blogspot.com. I'll just open up. Oh gosh. I thought there'd be like a PDF or a nice image, but nope. I don't know what these different cycles mean. Okay. I don't know what that means. Maybe I get a, oops, that's, let's see, each month and week has a theme, and there are a couple of cycles through other various prompts. It works best if you ignore most prompts, just go with whatever stupid idea pops in your head. Okay. Well, yeah, surprise, it's Excel. But you get like, so the month, so January would be month is Cosmos. And then for each week, you get gods for a week, then planes, then physics, then stars and planets. These are actually pretty good. I mean, the being in an Excel sheet is not particularly friendly, but I can see the organization. Whereas you can think about you're zooming way out. What are the cosmic things in your setting? Writing about those every day. And then you're kind of zooming in. And now you're zooming in. And so by the end of, it seems like you're kind of getting, and then in the end, you get wilderness stuff. Yes, I'm kind of going back and forth. If you go to Spriggans-den.com, or sorry, no, wait, sorry, the calendar, that was where the thing, it's at licheslibrum.blogspot.com. Let me need like a notepad. Do I have like a notes? I do have a notepad. Yeah, I got it. I'm gonna just, there you go. leechesLibrum.blogspot.com/2023//a-prompt-calendar-4/lore24.html. Hunter Fox asked, did I ever check out One Page Dungeon? No, I didn't. What is that? I think I got a couple minutes left. I can't not do that. Let's see. One Page Dungeon. No, I want One Page Dungeon, not the dungeon contest. Is that it? Is this it? Wadabu's One Page Dungeon generator? Windows has the Sticky Notes app. I'm on Windows. Why don't I have the Sticky Notes app? Do I just not know about the Sticky Notes app? I'll have to figure it out. You passed it to me via email a while ago. All right, Hunter, I will go look it up. I probably just slipped into my subconscious. But we'll end this stream with the Chapel of the Mad Magus. For a millennium, the Chapel of the Mad Magus was considered lost. Lately, a terrifying basilisk has made its lair there. Got a round door to the east. Where's 2? A blade of death. A blade of death wish among rubble on the ground. A stuffed human with a mysterious, unnaturally heavy carpet in their hands. All right. Interesting. All right. Well, I will look back up for that done, Jen. All right, folks, I'm gonna call it a day. Yeah, let me know. Maybe Lore 24 we'll do that. That seems really good. I wanted to do kind of more something wildernessy, but of course with that Lore 24, you can always just do wilderness if you want. And I like the flexibility of being able to do different things than you need. So try to make that a thing, maybe. Brian Smith says that they rolled up their first encounter in their solo trek, a classic clean out the basement quest, but it's filled with large snails who are sacred and can't be killed. Well, just get yourself a big bucket and carry those snails out and repopulate them somewhere safe. That's my suggestion. Could I do a video on the wish spell, Sapphire Ridge? Well, I absolutely could. Sure. Is there anything particular? Give me a little bit more before we get out of here. Give me a little bit more. What on the wish spell would you like? Does it just look like a general thing? I mean, the wish spell is kind of one of those things that I think is just you have a lot of fun with. I mean, as the party, you're trying to word your wish. I just think I'm always thinking of that classic genie's lantern kind of deal. So you're always trying to figure out how you can get what you want from the genie, and this or the spell, and the spell is just by its nature like the genie, just trying to jam you up. Daniel was telling me about a good one where it was someone like they wished to be like they were going to get some kind of magic item, and it was always classic like I wish the magic item was in front of me, and that person vanished, and they appeared in the room with the thing they were looking for in front of them, but of course there was some terrifying creature and they were protecting it, and then they were quickly killed. But it was just something kind of funny, right? But that's you're kind of looking for that, and I think when the players, it's the most fun when the players aren't necessarily trying to just calculate the heck out of it. But you can't blame them if they can. I mean, wish it's a high level spell. You don't really get to cast it too much, or you even find an item that allows you to have one. So I don't blame them for not wanting to foul it up, but it's something I feel like you just have a lot of fun with. But sometimes, I mean, that was a really kind of clear, neat twist, right? It was kind of the obvious twist. Instead of it puts the thing in front of you, but you didn't say bring it to me. Of course, that one could have been like bring the sword to me, and then like the sword sticks to you, like oh, you and the sword, like you could have many ways to skin that particular cat, right? But it's your excuse to have a little fun. Obviously, it's the party's and excuse to have fun, and I like it much more when it's for things like that as opposed to give me 20 strength. That's where I feel like don't be boring like that as a player. Don't ask for 20 strength. If you want to ask for the strength of an ogre or something, then say that. Or say like I want to have whatever, but don't ask for numbers. Don't say I'm gonna be level 20. It's like that's a meta construct. There's nothing in the world that says what level 20 is, kind of thing. All right. This is a very little articles on it. Cool. Well, I'll try to think of a couple of angles on it. And then we'll go. Hey, no Saurian. Yep, sorry you're late. I didn't really promote much, so that's kind of on me. But we shall return. We shall return. Yeah, there's probably you could definitely do kind of different wishes. Like I said, I would just encourage players just on the side, right? Just like GM to players, like, hey, like don't wish for that stuff. Like think about what the wish means in the world, and like, cause I would definitely do my best to punish someone who was just to like use it as some kind of like just outright like make me a god, kind of thing. Like, all right, I'm gonna, So I would kind of just for me, I would want to lay some ground rules, but you want it to be fun. You want it to be fun. All right, folks. I hopefully will be back tomorrow. If I'm not, then have a super Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. I'm gonna probably be off. I'm gonna be off between Christmas and New Year's. I won't be in a place to stream. I'm pretty sure. I'm going out of town, so won't be any streaming next week. So these last couple of days, if I can get some streams done, I can. Otherwise, I'll be out. I will post more updates. So to be let people know who aren't in here kind of what my schedule is, but that's kind of what's going on. So have a great end of December, I guess. Ultimately, I'll try to post up, maybe not videos, but little bits and blobs here and there. But just enjoy the day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, and I'll talk to you later. Bye now.